At 94, when memory itself becomes a fragile companion, William Shatner finally speaks about a truth that lived in the shadows for decades. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic in the way people expect. It arrives quietly, like a long-held breath finally released. One name sits at the center of it all: James Doohan. To the world, he was warmth, humor, heart. But behind the smiles and the convention applause, there was a story left unfinished, and a silence that lasted far too long. It begins on a soundstage that no longer exists, under lights that felt hotter than they needed to be. A group of actors learning how to become something iconic without realizing it yet. Shatner remembers the confidence, the pressure, the feeling that everything depended on getting it right. And then there was Jimmy. Steady, reliable, always ready. The kind of man who made chaos feel manageable. The kind of man whose presence filled gaps others didn't even notice. For years, fans believed they saw the full relationship on screen. The captain and the engineer. Authority and loyalty. But off-camera, things were more complicated. Shatner admits now that leadership comes with blind spots. That being the center of attention can distort how you see the people holding everything together. And sometimes by the time you realize that the moment to say something meaningful has already passed. There were long days, endless takes, tempers stretched thin by exhaustion. Shatner was demanding. He knew it. He felt the weight of carrying a show that could disappear at any moment. And in that pressure, he didn't always see the quiet sacrifices being made beside him. James Doohan never complained. He showed up. He delivered. He supported everyone, even when his own struggles stayed hidden. What most people didn't know, what Shatner says he didn't fully understand at the time, was what Jimmy carried beneath the surface. Pain that predated the show. Wounds both visible and invisible. A resilience forged long before Hollywood ever noticed him. And yet he never asked for recognition. He didn't demand space. He simply did the work, again and again. As the years passed, success grew, but so did distance. Schedules changed. Priorities shifted. Conversations became shorter, then rarer. Shatner says there was no single moment of conflict, no dramatic falling out. Just a slow drifting apart that felt harmless at the time. But looking back, he wonders how many opportunities for connection were quietly missed. There's one memory that still lingers. A wrap party, loud and crowded. Jimmy standing off to the side, smiling, watching others celebrate. Shatner remembers catching his eye, thinking there would be time later. There always seemed to be time later. But later has a way of slipping through your fingers when you assume it's guaranteed. When James Doohan passed, the loss landed differently than Shatner expected. Not just grief, but regret. The kind that doesn't fade with condolences or tributes. The kind that asks uncomfortable questions late at night. Did he say thank you enough? Did he listen when it mattered? Or did he let the role of captain overshadow the responsibility of being human? At 94, Shatner doesn't speak to absolve himself. He speaks to acknowledge something he avoided for too long. That leadership without empathy leaves a mark. That admiration unspoken can feel like indifference. And that silence, even unintentional, can become a wound all its own. He talks about how James Doohan shaped more than a character. How his kindness set the tone for others. How his humor softened tension. How his loyalty was given freely, without conditions. And how that kind of presence is easy to take for granted when it never asks for anything in return. What makes this truth hard to hear isn't scandal. It's recognition. The realization that greatness often depends on people who don't seek the spotlight. That history remembers faces, but not always the hands that held everything together behind the scenes. And that by the time we fully understand someone's value, they may no longer be there to hear it. Shatner says age has stripped away the defenses he once relied on. There's no career to protect now. No image to maintain. Just honesty. And with that honesty comes a quiet wish that he'd said more when it mattered. That he'd been less busy leading and more present listening. So, what does this truth leave us with? Not blame. Not bitterness. But a reminder that time is not as generous as we pretend it is. that the people who support us deserve to be seen before it's too late. And that appreciation delayed can feel like appreciation denied. At 94, William Shatner finally tells the truth, not to rewrite the past, but to honor it, to give voice to something long overdue. And as the memory of James Doohan lingers, steady and warm, one question remains: how many unsaid truths are we still carrying, waiting for courage, while there's still time to speak?